is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, the book club covering the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. In this episode, Bitches and I are going to talk about a book that fucked me up good, and I will cry during this episode, probably more than once. So get ready for that, kids. Here we go. Welcome. Welcome to the show. I am Natasha.
And I am Chris, better known as Bitches, on my own podcast, the Unscrupled Look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes, I was talking about the book club in front of some friends who don't listen to the show. And Owen was like, oh yeah, who are you hosting that with? And I was like, Bitches. And my friends were like, whoa, do you not like her? And I was like, oh, no, she goes by Bitches. It's fine. Just stay in her lane, guys. Shut up.
Go with it. It's fine. She self-identifies as Bitches. Don't question her.
So you volunteered for this one because you've read it a bunch of times.
Yeah. I first read this book when it came out in 1998. It was it was part of Oprah's book club, but I didn't let that stop me. And And it was one of the books that was at the exchange on my shitty little base somewhere in mumble. And there weren't a lot of books at the time, so I'd read literally anything I could lay my hands on. And this one really just knocked it out of the park. I was so excited to have a decent book. And I've read it pretty much every few years ever since. So I've been literally reading this book for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the kind of book that for a lot of book clubs, I'm glad I read the book, but I know I'm not going to go back to it. And this one, and sometimes it's because it's really painful. And this is one that, despite it being really painful, I'm almost positive I'm going to go back to it. I really think I will. You listened to the audiobook recently, right?
Yeah. This most recent reread, I did the audiobook on my commute with, ironically, with my podcast partner. So he's read it now too.
This is really a testament to how excellent this writing is, because the audiobook narrator is real bad. I thought, she just goes at like a breakneck pace. She doesn't have a distinctive voice for different characters. And there is a sort of like monotone to sentences that I feel really need more inflection. And at first, when I was listening, I genuinely thought I accidentally had it at 1 1/4 time, that I had sped it up because she was going so quickly. And I went and looked at the reviews, and somebody was like, does she have an appointment to get to or something? Why is she going so fast? But after listening for like 45 minutes, it didn't matter, because the book is so gorgeously written that even a bad narrator just can't do anything to it. You know, in the end, it's just whatever. Go ahead, read it how you want, but it's doing what it's going to do without you. So fine.
Exactly. She just, Barbara Kingsolver, I don't know if you've read any of her other books, but after I read this one, I went out and read a bunch of her other stuff. She's that good all the time. I mean,
it's so unfair.
I think this is her best one, but she's that good all the time.
I read The Bean Trees, but it was ages ago. I don't remember it. Yeah.
I remember that it was beautifully written and that it was about some horrifying shit.
Yeah.
And that's all I got. But yeah, she takes some horrifying shit and she writes it beautifully. And I admire that.
Yeah. And there's a real, she knows how to make a place feel like you're sitting there with everybody. When people say atmosphere, usually that's meant to convey an overall vibe. But when I say atmosphere, I genuinely mean the atmosphere is humid around me as I'm reading. Like it's a fucking weather event, you know? And especially because I'm in Texas right now in the middle of summer, and I was like out walking a lot listening to the audiobook. And I had some moments of just being like, this is really feeling a little close to home right now. But
shit just got real.
Right. So for those of you who maybe haven't listened to a lot of other Unspoiled, or if you have, you might have missed me talking about this. I grew up in a household with a very strict Christian, like fundamentalist father. And my father was nothing like the father in these books. I would like to just really go out there and say he was not like incredibly condescending or like obviously holding his children in contempt, women in contempt, the way that this man does. However, there is a whole lot about this guy and his attitude and the way that he handled religion that was hitting so close to home that I had to like stop for a breather sometimes. There are some excerpts that I will read later that I read to my mom about his wife's experience living with him. And there was just a long silence after I read them, and my mom just goes, holy shit. And I was like, yeah, like he wasn't abusive. He wasn't, but there is a kind of person that even if they never lay a hand on you, you are always aware it's around the corner and it may never happen. And it almost didn't ever happen. There was one time he really lost it and broke a door in half. But I was aware that the possibility was in him and that he was always restraining himself. That he was somebody who had grown up in this sort of household and was constantly trying to not be the thing that he had to live with as a kid. And that was kind of the only thing that kept him from completely losing it and beating me or my mom or, doing God knows what. And the religion is a weird thing because it came halfway through my childhood. So I knew him before this became who he was. He found God through AA when he got clean, and he decided to, really replace his addiction with religion. And it was such a strange thing to watch somebody turn into another person and disavow who they had been and almost hold it against you that you knew who they had been before. Like there's a feel to that in the flashbacks that I feel like it's hard to, all of his daughters, like there is parts of what they all go through that I really relate to. But Orleana has a particular insight because of having been with him before he turned this corner and experienced this terrible guilt that feels very similar to how I felt watching him as I grew up. So this book just kind of like beat me to death. And it was a weird coincidence because I started reading this the day that my father passed away a couple of years ago. He was living in a home with my stepmom, and she sold her house and she's moving, and she found all of these photographs and all of this like stuff from when I was a kid and was like, do you want this? I'll ship it to you. And I said, sure. And the box of stuff arrived the day I started reading this book. And it was just like a 1-2 punch of just really heavy shit, And I feel like it laid me out a little bit for like a couple days. I was just not in a real good place. And I just, anybody who has sort of like lived with a person like this, I just want to warn you that she knows how to write the looking in from the outside. She never goes into his perspective. It's all from his wife and daughters. And that's part of what makes it so effective, I think, that we never have to consider things from his point of view. That's not put on us, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, that's where I'm coming from with this. I just want everybody to know that.
Okay. So it's interesting that this was so incredibly personal for you, and it made you see your father in a different context that was there all the time, but maybe kind of under the surface, you don't really address that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that I often think of my father as like a low-key success story, because he started to sort of come out of the really the fundamentalism that was it really sort of crossed over into superstition sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like for example, my mother had like a crystal hanging from her rearview mirror, and he said that was satanic, and I told her to take it down. Or if like I had like little poison dart frogs figurines in my room, and he said that like frogs represented the devil and wanted me to get rid of them. Like things like that were just so strange and had nothing to do with anything as far as I could see. But for him, it was like so non-negotiable. And when he finally passed away, he had really gotten over a lot of that. And he wasn't so strange about such particular things. And he had started going to a church that was a lot less sort of fire and brimstone and borderline dangerous, honestly, in my opinion. So I really, it's something to see what happens to their father, because he never, ever learns. There is no movement for him at all. He is who he is from the first page of this until he dies. And that's it.
Anything, he gets worse.
Oh, yeah.
He gets more and more fundamentalist as his will is thwarted. Like the more things don't go his way, the more he just doubles down on that shit.
Yeah.
And to the point where he's not even like he's not even doing things for a religion. He's just making stuff up. Like the thing that struck me on, like, I don't know, sometime during this reread is he keeps trying to get all the kids to go down to the river. Well, if you listen to his girls, they're always talking about, we take this path to this one swimming hole that's totally safe. And we use that all the time. Why the fuck can't he just baptize kids there? Why the fuck he's got to be all about this river all the time?
Yep.
Like one simple little compromise, and he probably could have been way more successful. But no, every time someone tells him no, he just digs his little heels in and says, no, it's my way. My way is right. White man, rawr.
It is really striking, the kind of personality that sees any sort of compromise as an admission of fault. Like, because that is one of the personality traits that he shared with my father. My father, you could have an argument about something very specific, find it written that he was incorrect, and he would never verbally acknowledge that you had found that evidence. You would try and get him to say, do you see? You were mistaken. And he would just kind of stare at you and just not respond. It was like, he was unlike almost anybody that I have ever met, in that he was so obvious about his pride. Like, most people don't really want to be that transparent about their ego. And he just was fine with people knowing that he needed to be right, to the point that he was completely inflexible that way. And I find that really, like, there's almost something like, well, at least I know what I'm dealing with, and you're honest about the fact that you're like, but, right. But yeah, so the book starts off with this family traveling from Georgia to the Congo. And we really find out pretty quickly that this trip was not wholeheartedly approved by the Baptist, committee, or whatever it is that you want to call it, that was in charge of sending them.
Yeah, the organizational committee for missions really was not down for this particular mission. It was not advisable, and they were telling them this is probably not such a good idea, but if you're going to do it, I guess we'll give you some of the stuff we normally give to missionaries because we don't want you to die.
Yeah, it's meant to be like double what they actually get. And they are advised to not go, but we find out later that he didn't really totally disclose that to his wife, that they said that it was a bad idea because what say would she have? Like, that was just so not a factor to him.
Oh, yeah. He didn't tell any of them. They thought that they were going with the full blessings of the committee, and this is just what you get. Never realizing there was like a whole bunch of training they were supposed to have, like the language and customs, and maybe they might not have sucked so much if they'd had any of that. But no, Nathan, he was just, we're going to spread God's love.
What do you think? Do you think he would have been different with training, or would he have just gone and done the same shit?
Oh no, he would have been exactly the same, but the women would have known which bush they should be peeing in, you know? They would have maybe not brought a hammer to fix a mud house. They would have, you know, there's so many decisions that they could have made differently if they had had the opportunity. Now, you know, Rachel probably would have been pretty clueless regardless because she was a goddamn idiot, but the rest of them would have made an effort. Yeah,
it's the character development is really fun to watch because with some of them it's very extreme. I mean, Leah is obviously the one that undergoes the biggest transformation, I think, in terms of like realizing her father's full of shit. But then there's somebody like Rachel who just never progresses past the age of 15. We meet her at 50 and she's talking and thinking the exact same way. And it's kind of fascinating because we always have this idea, especially those of us who are more empathetic people who really try and like understand experiences that aren't ours. We assume that if somebody is pushed into this sort of immersive thing, that they will begin to sympathize and understand. But Rachel is proof that that doesn't always happen. She is somebody that the more she is pushed to experience what everyone else is experiencing, the more she resents that she is being put on the same level as them and that she should be exempt because, and focuses on that rather than actually looking at what is in front of her.
Rachel is the living personification of white privilege.
Entirely.
Like, that is it in a nutshell. It's like, oh, you mean that means me too? But I'm special.
Yep.
Don't you see how white I am? Damn it. No, look harder. Look at me.
Yeah, it's really like, because at one point being white is a real liability, but she manages to go somewhere where she can cash in on it. Like, she finds the place where that is how it works. And you know, that's going to be where she fucking lives and dies. And it just, so.
Did you ever ask yourself, why didn't she go back to America?
I didn't, actually. You know, like, I just kind of felt like, and we're jumping ahead a little bit here.
Okay.
But I kind of felt like she liked having a large enough group of people to feel superior to, that she wanted to stay as close to them as possible while simultaneously remaining separate from it and profiting off it.
So they totally still had that in Georgia in 1965 when she could have gone back.
I don't feel like she could have profited off of it the same way.
That's
because I feel, you know, her own family was somewhat poor. She managed to like get in with a group of people that she wanted to when she was in South Africa with, like, you know, the ambassadors and whatnot.
Okay.
I feel like that's what kept her there, is like I think she might have been intending to go back to the United States. And then when she realized that she could like rub elbows simply by virtue of being white with people who had serious money, there was no appeal left in the going back to the United States anymore. But did you have another theory on that?
Oh, totally think that she is so focused on fitting in and being quote unquote normal and not being someone that could be talked about in a dismissive or derisive way. Anyway, she knew that if she went back to the States that she was always going to be like, oh, did you hear about that Rachel? She spent years in Africa, and don't you know her little sister Plum died over there? Oh, the poor thing. We should pity her. And she didn't want any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah, for sure.
I think she just didn't want to be... She didn't want to be the girl from Africa, so she just stayed in Africa.
Yeah.
Where everyone's that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that. So the family comes over to the Congo in order to try and save this community that they are moving into. And right away, the immediate first encounter with these people, and we find out later what a big deal this was, but at the time it was so meager to them and they could not understand. They killed like several goats and had this huge feast and party. And this family arrives, and all of these women are naked from the waist up, and they're eating this food that none of the girls have ever heard of. It's super spicy, which they're not used to at all. And, you know, it's a culture shock on a level that none of them was prepared for at all. And their father gets up in front of everybody and delivers this sermon about the nakedness of, was it at Sodom? Where was he talking? Like, I can't even remember what it was. But yeah, he basically like points a finger at like one particular topless woman and really gets the crowd staring and glaring at her, even though they don't even know why they are, because he doesn't have a translator yet. Yeah. I don't think. So no, they are
haven't joined the village yet.
Yeah. So he's just managing with the sheer force of his personality to show them all that he is disapproving. And this woman starts to get the picture and tries to sort of cover up. And a lot of the other women just straight up leave with their kids because they're just like, oh, that's what this is going to be? We came and ate, but now we're done. Bye.
Yeah. And frankly, who could blame them?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't tell me to cover up dim titties. They're awesome.
Right.
And frankly, fuck you. It is hot.
And like, it's really fun because they are completely fine with being topless, but then this family who's scandalized by the toplessness wears pants where you can see the outline of their legs and buttocks. And that for them is scandalous. And I can't believe they're walking around like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a kind of fun little thing.
I love the way Barbara does this great job of having the girls acknowledge this, but also not be ready to connect that these are the same weird standards that are just cultural and you really can't expect other people to understand it in their guts. Mm-hmm, like they don't quite get there on a visceral level, but they start thinking that way. And I love how she shows us these little bits that gradually lead up to complete character changes for most of them. Anyway, yeah. But yeah. Yep.
So the four daughters, we have Rachel, who's the oldest, who we talked about as being the embodiment of white privilege. We have Leah, who upon arrival is absolutely worships her father and wants to be herself a preacher's wife at some point and like follow in his footsteps. That's Leah. And then we have Ada, who is Leah's twin, and she was born disabled. And as far as everybody thinks, she can't talk. But she can. She just chooses to not talk. And I think it's when we are in, what is the littlest girl's name?
Ruth May.
Ruth May. I think it's in her head that she says, but Ada doesn't talk because it's hard for her and also she hates everybody.
Yeah, because her brain got all shriveled up that's why she only has movement on one side and also she hates us all.
Yeah. Which I really love that she has that insight because everybody else just straight up just thinks that she doesn't. And once we're inside Ada's head, this bitch is perceptive. She is somebody who, like, she has a lot of self-awareness for somebody so young, which only gets stronger later in life as she looks back and realizes that she was kind of a martyr about things. And she is 100% aware that her father is bad at this and fucking up. And there is a moment that she describes where she asks a question in, like, youth group. And rather than answer her question, she's sent to the corner. And, like, that's it. They don't actually engage with what she thought. She was asking in good faith. She wasn't trying to be a smartass, but they interpret it as her being fucking like an instigator on Twitter or something and send her off. And that is the moment that she realizes that she stopped believing in God. And as somebody who's had that same experience in church with my dad and wrote a story about it that won an award, I just really related to this a lot. Like, girl, it's really hard when you have to continue play acting because you are still a child and you don't, like, you can't engage on that level and let your parent know honestly how you feel about a thing yet, because they are not trying to hear your opinion when you're this age. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, my father, I told him I did not believe a couple times. Like, I was just like, this doesn't work for me. And he insisted I come to church with him every Sunday until I was 18 years old. And he insisted that I go to Bible studies on Thursday nights, and all of the events that they held, I had to go, even though he was aware. And I pretty much just dropped talking about the fact that I didn't agree, because you're just setting yourself up for a lecture.
Well, he thought you were going to catch faith like a cold or something. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. If we just put you around enough believers, then eventually you're just going to succumb to the inevitable. Sadly, that's not, okay, maybe not sadly. Fantastically, that's not how shit works.
Yeah, for some people, I think it may, simply because it's very easy to have, like, and in some ways, my father was somebody who really liked to be handed a list of rules to follow. Mm-hmm. Before getting involved in this, he was like a soldier. So,
oh shit. Okay. Yeah. That all makes sense then.
Yeah. So it was just, and that is part of what about Nathan is so similar to him. My father basically had a ton of guilt going into his new religion that he was promised to be washed of, because it was stuff that you can't make up for. You know, it was murder. It was abandonment. He had some mission that he was meant to go on that he couldn't. And the two people that went in his place, they both died. The kinds of things that are really similar to the guilt that Nathan carries around for the rest of his life. And that is something that is so appealing. Like, when you have a religion that tells somebody who's carrying that specific kind of baggage, a weight that I am not personally familiar with at all, it makes sense that this would appeal to you, because you just don't see another way of being saved from this, you know? So in that respect, I get why Nathan would cling to his religion even more, but rather than actually, like, trying to be better, he lashes out at everybody around him and blames everyone else for the fact that he's failing, or even his weirdness with his wife. He gets her pregnant, but then, like, is angry at her for being pregnant. Yeah. And blames her for, like, the sex that they had because she's wanton kinds of things.
Well, she was wanton, but I don't think that's why they had sex. And yeah, the children being the representation of their sin was just, I've known people like that. Oh, yeah. They're so nutso.
Yeah. It's the strangeness of his relationship with his wife, and how she was like this shadowy figure beside him, because she couldn't be a whole person without him hurting her, literally hurting her for it. I saw my mother there, and that, like, her realization as she got older, because she married my father when she was 16 and he was 31.
Oh my God.
It was So she was at a huge power disadvantage right out of the gate.
Your mom.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
God.
She started to realize who she was when she was like 18, 20, and began to get into meditation and begin like getting into like new age stuff. And they were already married and she already had a child and she could not leave. She wasn't in a position to get a job and be able to support me by herself. And my father at first had no problem with her getting involved in those things because he had not yet found Christianity. He was still dealing and using drugs himself and, all of this. And then when I was about 8, that was when he got clean. She kicked him out. He went to AA and decided to, and all of a sudden, retroactively, he tried to take it back, that she'd be allowed to do the things that she had been doing for the past couple of years that were finally bringing her some comfort when she had been coming from, obviously, parents who let her get married to a 31-year-old man at 16. It's not a great situation.
No.
So she was coming out of that into this marriage and needed something, and she found it, and then he tried to take it from her, essentially. And she had to shrink in order to manage continuing to do what she needed for her own spirituality without raising his ire or making him really fervently make an attempt to take it away, like outlawing it essentially within the household. And once they split up, which took far too long, he didn't want even me to have anything like resembling books that were something that she would have read in the house. He made me literally lock them in a trunk in a basement. I couldn't even have Harry Potter books out or anything like that. It was I'm telling you, Nathan, like, he is a caricature in some ways, but it is so shockingly close in so many ways that it just continually, like, there were just small moments with him of the way she would describe him standing, or the tone he would take when he said something, or the closed look that he would get on his face halfway through somebody else's sentence where you already knew it did not matter what you said next. He had decided, and that was it. And the sort of law that he held in his house that everybody knew they had to follow, and the body movements or the tone that he would take when you knew it was dangerous now, and you had to watch the way that you proceeded if you chose to proceed at all. And his wife having to be so careful about the way that she interacted with him, and knowing, and this part kills me, knowing that her children held her in contempt for it. Because her children didn't see what she all went through before they were even around. They have not got the context that she's been living with this for far longer than them, and is not just trying to protect herself, but also protect them. And they don't quite grasp that. So they look at her, and there's a sort of disdain there because they don't really appreciate the position that she's in. And I definitely felt that towards my own mother as a kid at times. I was just like, what are you doing? How are you allowing this to happen?
Why aren't you protecting me? And
why aren't you protecting yourself? You know,
and you don't realize that she is just, you just don't know how bad it could be. That this is legit the best she can do in this moment. And I didn't have the kind of father you did, but my mother was this kind of guy, not with religion, but with other things. And yeah, she very much had I could be talking and I could see on her face when it didn't matter. And it was most of the time, pretty much like she had already decided because she knew best. And she wasn't stupid or anything, so most of the time she did know best, but she had no interest in entertaining other people's feelings on any level, or address or trying to soften anything she said when she laid down her law. Anybody else's needs or emotions in the house didn't actually matter in the face of her getting the thing she decided was right to happen. And you're absolutely right. Barbara got it 100% correct, down to the fucking posture. Like some of the poses she talks about him striking, oh yeah, that was in there. It's a personality type that becomes very apparent when someone has complete control over other human beings.
Yeah.
And it's not a good look, and it's not a good place to grow up.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, because if you haven't grown up with somebody like this, and you haven't been around anyone like this, you don't really believe that it could be this extreme. I think, I don't think a lot of people understand, because even if you are, quote, around a person, if you see somebody preaching, for example, who is really virulent about whatever they believe, you aren't experiencing them in that personal context where you get to really feel the full force of them knowing that they have power over you specifically as a person. If you're just somebody who's in the congregation and you just walk up and talk to them afterwards, you can also just walk away and they know that and you know that, and the whole dynamic is different. But if you are the child of a person who is able to exercise whatever they feel over you, it is just, it's a very different experience. And I also have to say that I admire the fact that she doesn't write the beatings. There's no moments where we actually see it happen. She just talks about it. Well, she got beat half to death. She got her face bruised for like the next week. Yeah. He pulled off his belt as he was running after her. It happens. They talk about it. It's not like it's a secret, but she doesn't make us sit through that part, because that's not necessary. All we need to see is the fear and dread on a daily basis of being around them at all. And the beatings are just sort of like, in a way, almost a relief. It all came to a head and it's fucking over for now. And we can maybe have another couple of days before the next time this erupts again,
Pressure valve.
Exactly. It really feels that way.
Yep.
And so one of the things, what's that?
And it always did.
One of the things that I read to my mom, and I'm trying to find the exact spot. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So you wind up walking on eggshells, never knowing which Tatanzolo is home at the moment. Under that uncertain roof, where was the place for my girls? No wonder they hardly seemed to love me half the time. I couldn't step in front of my husband to shelter them from his scorching light. They were expected to look straight at him and go blind. And later on, a wife may revile such a man with every silent curse she knows, but she can't throw stones. A stone would fly straight through him and strike the child, made in his image, clipping out an eye, or a tongue, or an outstretched hand. It's no use. There are no weapons for this fight. There are countless laws of man and of nature, and none of these are on your side. Your arms go weak in their sockets. Your heart comes up empty. You understand that the thing you love more than this world grew from a devil's seed. It was you who let him plant it. And her own ferocity turns over inside her, and she turns away hard, never to speak to him again. Instead, she'll begin talking to you, her mother, demanding, with a world of indignation, how could you let him? Why? Y'all, when I tell you, and I read those to my mom, and she just was like it was just, it just hit so hard. So I wasn't ready. Is what I'm saying. I was coming at this book thinking this was going to be a really interesting tale of living through a life-changing experience in a very external sort of way, a really superficial sort of, and this is coming into a brutal place with brutality already in your life. So now it's closing in on you from all sides, and there's no place to go. And the isolation and the feeling of just being on an alien planet for a lot of these women. Some of them are able to like cope better than others with this, but initially it's the same for all of them. And it is just really, really well done. So, all right. Things basically continue in this vein for about a third of the book. Nathan, is fighting everything that he is being told about this area, about what these people believe, about the way simple things should be done, like planting seeds. Yeah. He comes down here with this fucking arrogance, thinking he's going to teach these people how to farm food, like they wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, obviously they're just stupid, right? They don't get the thing where you put seeds in the ground and shit grows.
It's astonishing that he would really believe that these people who have been forced to live not with supermarkets or anything like that, that they wouldn't know that you can grow food for yourself. Like,
it's not astonishing that he wouldn't believe that. I could find you like 12 white guys at a junior college who would have the exact same ideas. Like, well, if those darn folks in Africa would just plant crops like we Americans, and they could have lots of plenty and food. They don't understand because they've never been anywhere.
And if you told them it floods and washes everything away, their response is, then move.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really easy fucking, yeah.
And the earth turns to slop. That's the thing. It's not, it doesn't stay where it is. It becomes a river of mud. She uses that phrase several times. And if you've never seen a river of mud or been in a place where the earth does not stick together when it is wet, you cannot comprehend the quagmire that the world becomes when it's damp out. It's ridiculous how much more challenging some places in the earth are to live than others. And I know I live in Southern California, literally the most temperate place on the planet. We can grow anything. It's Eden right up in here. I've lived other places where shit does not grow and where just a little bit of weather can completely fuck not just your day, but your entire community's infrastructure. Yeah. No one can get shit done.
Yep.
And if you've never experienced that, yeah, you do. It's like stupid because you think of your environment as a constant.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not. There are lots of places in the world that are at like a negative 12 modifier. And you have to account for that shit.
That's true, though. That's true.
Nathan represents Americans.
They're playing on hard mode in the Congo.
Yes, our hubris with which we approach every other culture in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one.
Yeah.
And oh my God. So when I first read this, when I was 18, this book changed the way I think on a fundamental level about culture and race and about my own responsibility for my whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
And the shit I need to be thinking about and doing and taking into account existing as a white person in the world, not just in America, but in the world. And sometimes I do okay, and sometimes not so much, but I'm trying. And this book started me thinking about it. So I kind of want everybody to read it. I know not everyone's going to have that experience, but I think some people might.
I think so. I mean, even as somebody who's coming into this knowing a lot about white supremacy and privilege, and I still was shocked at the audacity and not even of this individual family, of our government because I did not even know how fucking blatant we are. I always think of our interfering internationally as being sort of like a subterfuge. As we pretend this one thing and we're really doing another thing, but we don't even do that. We just come in and we're just like, nah, and just fucking knock shit over like a bunch of, bowling pins.
Yeah.
We know that nobody is going to call us on it. Who's going to do shit? Another European country? I doubt it,
Oh yeah, because at the same time we were doing this shit in South America, you want to see something that is just grotesque. Read the history of what happened in Chile in the 60s with President Allende. Holy crap, we literally hired assholes to go kill him in his White House.
Yep.
Holy crap, we legit did that. The CIA is some efficient motherfuckers, guys.
Yeah.
Hope you're all down with the cussing, because there's going to be a lot if I have to talk about U.S. foreign relations.
Nobody listens to Unspoiled and is like, can you guys keep it to a minimum? And if they do, I just laugh at them. I got one YouTube comment that one time on some book club podcast, and she was like, you guys just cuss too much. And I was like, all right, listen to something else. And she got real mad at me.
Deuces, yo.
Yeah, we went back and forth for a minute because she kept trying to say that swearing made me seem less intelligent. And I was like, that means that you are unintelligent. I don't really know how else to approach that for you, but you need to come to terms with that classism.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but your ivory tower elite bullshit just stops you from being blunt about things that really need to be blunt.
Mm-hmm.
Some shit should be called shit. And some things need a fuck thrown in for emphasis.
So they are there are so many tiny little moments of just their will and positivity and optimism getting broken down. The first really intense one, and we see this from the outside as the little girls. They are watching their mother, and what is the name of the woman that helps her initially? Mama
Mwanza?
Mwanza. Yes.
Yeah.
And she is fucking all in this shit. She is helping them to cook and get their water, and she's trying to tell their father that if he plants it like that, they're not going to grow. All of this stuff. Right. And she finally kind of has it, because it's very clear when we are seeing this from the mother's perspective that the mother knows that this woman resents her shitty children, and the mother is just trying to soften that because she appreciates this woman so very much. But finally, understandably, Mama Mwanza gets a little sick of Nathan's shit, and she finally decides to bail.
Okay, I take it back. It wasn't Mwanza. That's the neighbor lady. I forget what this woman's name is, but she was totally there. She was totally helping them out. And also,
is it Tatamba? I thought it was.
It might have been Tatamba or something like that. But it was 2 weeks ago when I listened to that part, so it's just gone.
Okay.
But yeah, she was working her ass off, and finally it wasn't the kids being obnoxious that got rid of her. It wasn't having to do fucking everything for these helpless little grubworms. It was fucking Nathan not being able to give up on a point when she had told him, you might want to lay off on this. Maybe.
Tataba. That is it. Mama Tataba.
Okay.
Yeah. So she finally just abandons them and is like, y'all can figure out your own shit then.
Yep.
And that really leads to a kind of a breakdown for Orleana. It wasn't like she wasn't aware how much went into it. She was constantly thankful there was somebody there. And when this woman leaves and she has to take it all on, as usual, her husband feels that nothing domestic is his responsibility and is not inclined to help in any way. And it is 100% on her shoulders to do everything to put food on the table. And that is a very different prospect here than it is somewhere like the United States, where you can turn on a stove, pour water out of the faucet that's potable, unless you're in Flint, and get some food at the grocery store and just dump it into the pot, boil it, food's done. We're in a place where you have to go gather firewood, and you are living in a community that has been gathering firewood from this area for like 150, 200 years. And guess what? It's hard to find. Then you have to drag water up to the house because there's no fucking plumbing. And then you have to boil that water for at least 30 minutes before you can use it for literally anything because it is rife with fucking there's all kinds of dangers everywhere. There's the water. They have to bleach the floors because there's hookworm in the floors. They have to, go through all of their fruit to make sure that there aren't tarantulas living in it, snakes getting in the house. There's just the minor shit of day to day is a full-time job. And her kids have no comprehension of how much it's taking out of her to feed them and are being real shits about not having food at the times that they want it and it not being fucking jiffy when fucking Rachel, man, in particular is just so vocal about how unhappy she is all the time.
Yeah, her complaining that the peanut butter wasn't smooth enough.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, don't you just want to smack the shit out of her?
I really do.
Yeah.
I was a kid that just, not that I never complained, but I was a kid that was very sensitive about when I could tell if somebody was really trying their best, and I would not say shit about it if it was something that I wasn't used to or I felt like wasn't up to my standard. I had this fucking sense to watch and see this is the best they can offer or the best they can do, even at times where I maybe shouldn't have been giving them that kind of slack. And I would just shut up and deal with it. And it is just shocking to me that there are people who at Rachel's age are out here just in the situation they are in, where they can see you don't have a fucking Piggly Wiggly, as her father pointed out.
Yeah.
Where she still feels free to say this sort of shit.
Kids are literally starving to death right outside their door. And she's like, this isn't smooth enough.
Yep. So finally their mother, it comes to Rachel's birthday, and their mother had brought some Betty Crocker cake mixes, and she goes to pull them out, and they are hard as rocks because it is so humid here that it just completely solidified. They didn't have those anti-caking agents they got now that they throw into shit. And she is sobbing, crying at the kitchen table because it was something that she had obviously been low-key looking forward to, at the very least being able to manage this, and thinking that she had come prepared for at least a small pleasure like this. And she can't even do that. And honestly, it's the humidity that fucks a lot of things up. There's all kinds of weird tools that they bring that wind up rusting into place, and they can't actually use them, or they don't function the same way. At one point, their mother is again scraping for anything to sort of bring some brightness. So she's like, let's all work on our hope chests. And they're doing embroidery. And I think it's Leah who takes the hoop off of her embroidery after working on it really diligently. And there's a round rust mark that will never come out on the fabric. Just everything that they try to do that is familiar to make themselves feel better doesn't work here. It's just, it's like another planet, And that is as an outsider reading this, I felt so bad for them because it's similar. And this is completely a petty comparison, but you're going to know what I mean. Mm. It's similar to when you have had a really, really bad day, and all you want is this one particular shitty junk food, right? That's all you want. You just want it. You want the Cheetos, right? Okay, here, we got some Pepsi Cola. We want the thing that we know will just make us feel a little, and you go through the drive-through and get your whatever, and you're so excited to have at least one moment in this shit day, and you open your bag and it's somebody else's order. And it's not even necessarily, oh, well, just it's something you're allergic to or something you just really like. Even the smell of it, you're like, oh, God.
Yeah, you can't even try.
Yeah, and it's that kind of like deep in your bones disappointment of I just wanted this one thing to work out. I really, and I just really felt for them all with the number of times they came up against moments like that are seemingly petty, but like that shit matters to your psyche, you know?
Where it's like the one thing that could make you feel a little bit safe.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit safe, and you can't have it. And it's like, just about everything that made them feel safe or in control on any level just got systematically taken away from them before they even knew to look for it.
Yep.
And the scene where Nathan breaks the serving platter. Yeah.
He first, because this scene happens, and I don't remember the name of the man who was visiting them at that time when this all happened. But they have been
Brother Fowles. What
was his name?
Brother Fowles.
Oh, right, Brother Fowles. Yeah. And their father accuses her of having like dressed up and made the table nice because she is like trying to basically whore herself out to this black man.
Oh, that was Anatole when he came to visit.
That was Anatole? Okay.
Yeah, that was the first time Anatole came to have dinner with them. Because, you know, he's civilized enough, even though he's black, because he has a European name and he's been a little bit educated and he translates, you know. Mm-hmm. So he's the one person in the village who's good enough to eat at their table.
Right.
Fucking hubris, man.
And he's trying to, as gently as he can, explain to Nathan what it looks like to these villagers, with Nathan coming in and they're essentially like watching to see if the family experiences misfortune and whether or not that's like a result of them disrespecting the gods here, or if their family does well. And maybe that's evidence that they should transfer their faith to those gods, because he doesn't understand. We have to do what's fucking practical when we're starving to death. This isn't a fucking hypothetical God thing. We're going to do what feeds us. This isn't, you know, but he has no respect for that approach, because and it's funny because you want to say he doesn't have experience with that, but he does. He's experiencing that right now, except he sees that as God testing him. Well, he's looking at it from a whole other perspective.
He keeps himself so apart from any of those concerns. You notice in all of this that goes on, you ever hear about him missing a meal? You ever hear about him having any, like, having to deal with any of this shit? Someone puts up his mosquito netting at night. Someone makes him his food in the day. Someone makes sure he has clean clothes. He has no actual job.
Yeah.
That he has to do that ensures his survival. It's all taken care of him. His entire purpose in this village is to go out and talk to people, which he's doing. Mm-hmm. So he thinks he's doing his bit, I guess, but really he's just a drain on the family.
And it's like the other villagers comment at one point about how he's trying to tell them what to do when he can't even like shoot something to feed his family. And he's bewildered by that like accusation. Like he just doesn't understand the relevance, you know?
He doesn't even bother to try to get food for them. He doesn't do anything. Like Orleana is the one who's haggling for oranges and eggs. He's not going out and finding food. He's not doing anything except reigning over them with an iron fist. Big apple.
God, okay.
And none of them question it. This is the thing. This is how I think we have come so far.
This hit home for me also.
Yeah.
Because my father, once he was saved, he was, like I said, a member of this. It was a church that wasn't even like really a church. They met in like a firehouse with, you know, where you can rent out for like little events, and they would like have folding chairs. It wasn't a church. It was a sketchy weirdo thing. And there was a lot of emphasis put on tithing. And my dad would tithe so much that my mom had to open a secret bank account to put money aside so that I could get like school supplies and pay for me to go on field trips with everybody else or buy new clothes. And then when she bought that stuff, we'd have to hide it. Because
don't you know that every pencil you use is a pencil away from the Lord.
Like it became a thing where I heard them fighting and she was like, "We are your family." And he did not see it. He felt he was putting his resources where they were supposed to go. And the fact that we were over here having to have a whole secret hidden household economy that he didn't know about in order to just get basic things done. And he didn't notice. He had no awareness of the fact that I had clothes. Did he notice that I had new clothes? Never. Did he notice that I had notebooks or that I went on this field trip that was $25 and my mom had to scrape for that? No, because I wasn't part of the factors that he looked at. So this like complete disregard, it's such a weird thing because my father for sure considered himself a provider. He was thinking that he was accomplishing that, but he wasn't. My mother was managing what she had at her disposal to make it work, and he just did not know about it. And if he had ever found out about this other bank account, I really don't know what he would have done. That separate bank account got me my prom dress. Like this went on my entire life until they split up. When I was like literally a freshman in college, they finally decided to divorce. And it was just so far too late. And it has led to me having really fucked up relationships in which I am sure that my partner resents me and having to provide anything for me, and that I need to be 100% responsible for everything on my end so that they don't have something to hold over my head and sort of like emotionally blackmail me with. And the whole like attitude that he has where he has no participation in his household at all. And then they eventually leave and he simply does not know how to fill in that gap because he's never paid enough attention to have any idea how to do it. Like, you know, and there's nobody who's going to come to his rescue. He has burnt through any goodwill that anybody had, like long before his family left him. So it just makes me think like they split up and I came home and my father had wall to wall Chinese takeout containers in all of his cabinets because he just didn't really like, he cooked occasionally some like traditional Colombian stuff. Mostly it was just paying somebody else to do it because he just hadn't, you know, and I can't help but wonder once my mother's income was gone and her secret bank account that had covered all of those little corners was gone, I can't help but wonder if he started to realize what she had been up to and that she had been making up for things all over the place that he had never seen or appreciated, and that now it was like a lot harder on multiple levels than it had been. But that requires a kind of, again, perceptiveness that I don't know he really had. He was all up in his head all the time. And that's how Nathan is. It's 100% for them, this like theological experiment. And real life doesn't fucking factor into it, you know?
So I've known men like that after their women leave, and their attitude is usually, how dare she? Doesn't she know that, you know, it's her job to take care of these things. I'm special. It's like an extension of the white privilege into the male privilege.
Yay.
Yay! For some reason, they think that women owe them these things. That by the miracle of their birth with a penis, women are supposed to handle this shit. And when they don't, they're bad. They're bad women who are not doing their duty. Don't you know it's their duty?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm a lesbian. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh, God. Yeah, that moment, she's quoting, unto the woman, God said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. Oh, mercy. If it catches you in the wrong frame of mind, the King James Bible can make you want to drink poison in no uncertain terms. And it's just an alien concept to a lot of us. Somebody would look at that and literally believe it, but it 100% is literally believed by a giant portion of the population on planet Earth. Uh-huh. And my father was 100% one of those people and expected obedience from my mother, which if you started to learn who she was later in life is amusing to no end, because that is just so very much not who it turns out she is at all. But she married him too young to even know that yet.
Right. So, she wasn't done baking on any level.
Nope. Nope.
Oh, man. But.
So the last straw for Orleana, because they are struggling through this, Rachel's not really growing at all, except growing more irritated. There comes a terrible, sort of infection, that wipes out a bunch of people because they had a flood, and all of this waste gets mixed in with the water supply.
Yeah, they had dysentery.
Thank you.
All the children got dysentery. Having had dysentery, let me tell you, fuck, does that suck?
Oh, that sounds horrifying.
Oh God, there is nothing left inside you. Nothing.
Basically, he says you shit until you shit out your guts, which feels like a very good summation of how that is. Yes. Yep.
There's just nothing inside you anymore.
And then there's all this other flooding and everything that causes them to the food supply. It starts to become a lot more difficult, and there is the political stuff that is going on that is starting to interfere with their supply lines for things, and their stipend that they were getting gets cut off, because eventually it's clear that there's going to be a flat out revolution. And the people who they are in contact with from the Baptist community are like, you need to get out of here. And their father is straight up, we're supposed to stick through this thick and thin. That's God's plan. We're not running away. Essentially, he has this guilt that he's still dealing with, that he puts on this situation that's completely a whole other thing, and puts his family at risk as well, and feels like that's noble.
Yeah, and he's so ridiculous about it, because they're like, okay, your year is up. You did your time. Good job. Now, GTFO, it's not safe. You shouldn't have come here in the first place, and now you really, really have to go. And he's like, no, we're going to stay here until the next mission comes to relieve you. And the entire world is saying no one is coming to relieve you. No one is coming to take up this mission. We have to get out. All of us.
Yep.
And he's just not having it. Not having it.
And his decision to stay is really when things begin to completely fall apart. His wife she just stops trying to hide how disgusted she is with his decisions overall. Rachel completely starts to go off the wall with just constantly back talking and screaming at him about wanting to go home and this, horrible place. And Leah, who initially tries to be supportive of him and admires that he's trying to persevere, even she begins to see what a bad decision this is, and how little consideration he really put into it, and how little understanding he has. And he doesn't want more understanding. He is not open to that. And Ada, for her part, has been learning the language. And you get some really amazing little anecdotes from her of things that their father says during sermons, and how she's understanding the same word can mean 4 or 5 different things. And the way he pronounces it means something virtually the exact opposite, or otherwise very sort of humiliatingly funny, than what he actually intends to say. And how they're sort of a laughing stock, because he's just made no attempt to learn this or hear somebody when they try to explain to him that he's saying this incorrectly and needs to change just a syllable. He wouldn't even have to be the word. He just has to say that word slightly differently. Mm-hmm. But nah, he's not interested. They'll figure it out or they will go to hell. You know, like.
It reminds me of taking Spanish class when I was 15 in a sophomore in high school. And there was this one girl who the teacher would be like, no, you have to like try to say Spanish like Spanish. Stop trying to pronounce Spanish like English. It's not going to work. So there was this one word in the book and she's like, you know, Sally or whatever her name was, say the word. And she's like, habitation. And it's like, no, habitación. No, it's muy difícil. Just try it, honey.
Oh, God.
Like, habitation. She's like mad dogging our teacher. And Nathan had this same energy. He was just like, I could just see him, Bangala.
Right? Totally.
It's Bangala. God is love. Bangala. Poisonwood tree. Whatever.
Yeah, there's this tree that like can give you, if you burn it, for example, in the house fire, it could kill everybody in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't realize that Bangala, which is like he says Jesus is Bangala, he's trying to say God is good, is saying Jesus is poisonwood. And nobody could tell him anything, you know, like, but he's out here just saying this dumb thing every goddamn Sunday.
And the thing is, they don't know what he's trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a fuck.
Nope.
It's just like, we're just going to watch this shit.
Yeah, if it weren't for his attitude, I'm sure they'd have been more than happy to fucking talk through things with him and be like, no, this is actually that. But he doesn't want to give and take. He wants to come in and steamroll over everything.
Yeah. I think he kind of wanted to do like a Walt Disney Perfect Community. He was going to come in and set all these folks straight and, you know, fix everything and be the big hero. And that would make up for his terrible guilt.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know? And
100%.
Like not a bit of it worked, not even a little bit. I think the only good thing he did was maybe make a good fish fry that one time, but even that backfired.
So yeah, the daughter who has the most faith in him, Leah, begins rapidly to see that he does not know what he's doing, that he is making foolish mistakes, that he is not willing to listen at all. And it's not simply theoretical anymore. She was able to forgive this all when it was in theory, but as it's beginning to affect whether they can eat or not, and she's realizing he's still immovable, it changes her entire perspective of who he is as a person. And she's just starting to really see through his shit. And it's kind of painful to read her chapters as she's coming to terms with recontextualizing things that she used to admire about him now that she's older. And that's just fucking coming out of childhood, really. That's like, we all have those moments where we realize somebody that we have revered or that we thought really knew what was going on is either A, not good at this, or B, doesn't care like you thought they did, or C, is like, it doesn't have common sense to back up certain things. And with her and her father, it's all of those. And they all begin to rapidly leave him out of their like family, in so much as the way that they function and talk together and figure out how they're going to get food for the next day. He's like, he shows up to eat and sleep and otherwise is not really part of things. Yeah. And finally, it all really gets bad right after a ceremony. It's like, they light the woods on fire in order to get all of these animals out so that they can butcher them. And, you know, they've all been starving for protein because they're living off of manioc. And Rachel is horrified by the display of like bloodthirstiness and how brutal it is to these poor animals that are like literally realizing that they are about to burn to death and simply sitting down and allowing themselves to burn to death rather than running into the arms of like these people that are waiting for them, or animals that do run straight out and they're, either way they're going to be killed and there is no hope for them. And Rachel's like really affected by that in a surface way that I hoped she would internalize, but she does not at all. Leah, this whole thing started because they wanted her to hunt because she's learned how to use a bow and arrow effectively. And her father, as well as some of the other villagers, feel that a woman hunting is totally inappropriate. But then there are villagers who just hate her dad. And while they would ordinarily be all for siding with the people who are traditional, because their father is like also saying the same thing, these villagers are just like, no, let her fucking do it. Go ahead. Like, because they're just so irritated with this guy.
Yeah. We just want to see you be uncomfortable with your daughter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Probably
basically.
the only daughter you even like a little bit.
So what they wind up doing is they get into this horrible like conflict during a time after all of these animals have been killed that should normally be a celebration of plenty. Mm-hmm. They are beginning, there's like insults being thrown. Leah's given a really insultingly small portion of the stag that she killed herself. Mm-hmm. And when she chucks it back at the guy who threw it at her.
Oh, she hit him with it.
She did. And it sets off this whole thing where everybody is like fighting. And it's just a real moment of like, these white people ruin everything, don't they? Even though she doesn't mean to, she's trying, but it's still, their presence, that's all it takes for them to fuck up something that normally would be a good thing.
Well, she's portraying entirely the wrong gender role for that area, and not because like she feels like, yay, feminism, but she feels like no one else in her family is doing anything, so she has to. And she says right from the start that she's always been kind of a tomboy, and she's rough and tumble, and she wants to go out and do stuff. She really idolizes her father to the point where I think she almost wishes she'd been a boy so that she could be his son and maybe he would love her.
Yeah.
Just, I might be projecting. But
I kind of got that a couple times though. Yeah.
Yeah. Like she just wanted so much to be doing something useful. Mm-hmm. But really, I think the only reason she thought she could get away with it is her whiteness.
Yeah.
And that is where all of that comes into play, I think, where like you think that your whiteness lets you break the rules because you're above the rules. You're special. Mm-hmm. And Leah, baby, you're not special. You have to expect that if you're going to go all feminist on this tribe, that you're going to get shit for it. They're not just going to be like, oh, feminism, we never thought about it. Yeah, women can do everything men can. It's fine. No, you're not special. You're going to get an equal amount of shit or more than any other young girl who tries this. So stop being surprised.
Yeah, it's pretty striking to see whiteness and the assumption of white innocence and white methods being superior in a all black space. Not that like there are white people in the Congo and there's obviously imperialism and that like that, but where they are specifically, that holds no power. They're not somewhere where they can leverage that. They have no personal power. They don't even have any stipend coming in. There's no money. So they're in the exact same state as everybody else now. And that really changes everything. Being literally level playing field and realizing you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You have no way of coping with any of this. It's just, I totally agree with you. And there's a line, and I think it's Ada who says it, is that father like often would say how stupid they all were and that women didn't understand or that young girls would not understand certain things. And then she says, I often think it's a good thing that he never had a son or else he would have been forced to actually listen to someone else and he couldn't have borne that either. And I thought I really liked that one a lot. It's like, honestly, somebody like this isn't coping well with any of these options.
Ada is by far my favorite, and
she's great.
Like that.
Yeah, she is. She's just cuts to the bone. And like her assessments later of thinking that she was a martyr and really just like bought into this identity of herself as disabled that wasn't even true. And she's not wrong about that, but it's so understandable in the moment as a kid, especially, that that's all she knows. And that's what she's grasping when she's in this alien world. You know, she has to feel a sense of strong identity with something.
And she really was disabled because they didn't have the know-how to figure out that like you could have retrained your brain.
Right.
Like, that wasn't an option in 1963.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't. So yeah, she absolutely gets down on herself a bit for being a martyr. But she also is so just fucking realistic about it all. She's just like, yeah, I could have been better about that shit, but half my shit didn't work, so whatever.
There's like two different instances. One where they think that she's been eaten by a lion. And it just turns out that she's very slow and she's far behind. And there was something behind her on the path. She was almost sure, but never actually gets her. And then they wind up finding out that there was like an antelope or something that this lion killed instead, or a goat perhaps. Yeah. But her family doesn't find that out because she stops outside the house in the hammock to get a breather. And somebody passes her into the house, tells them, we found blood. We saw her tracks because she drags a foot as she walks. And we're pretty sure that she was killed. And the villagers are real briefly elated by this because they feel like it's proof that this asshole guy is finally getting what he deserves from the gods.
Yep.
And
Ada has people.
Right. And Ada has to sit there in the fucking hammock and listen to her family have such an understated, insulting reaction to the news that she's been killed. Yep. That it really does not seem to matter to them. And then walk inside and be like, hey, I'm still alive. And them just be like, oh. And they don't seem to care either way. And that's so brutal. And then later on, there's the fucking ants.
Oh, the ants.
I just can't. That is a fucking horror movie. Like, I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure it is an actual horror movie somewhere, this happening.
I'm pretty sure it's so horrifying that we haven't made a horror movie about it.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is, because American audiences would not cotton to that shit. We'll put Human Centipede, but actual ants crawling over everything and even eating everything in their wake, including people. Nope, can't do it.
So Ada has to, like, you know, she needs help to be able to keep up with everybody fleeing and getting to like higher ground, to the river, to wherever.
Yeah.
And
read Rachel's book, apparently.
Right.
God.
And Rachel. Yeah.
Sorry, I derailed you.
No, that's just like, I just keep remembering the part where she's like, yeah, you climb. If it's a book, guys, that is supposed to like help you survive dangerous situations. And one of the things is, if an elevator like goes in a free fall, and the way you survive is using somebody else as a literal human shield to take the impact for you. That's one of the things that's advised. Like, that just sums Rachel up so completely as a person and why she thinks the way she does. But yeah, Ada has to like watch in real time as her mother decides whether to save her or her toddler, I guess.
Yeah, Ruth May was 5, so she's solidly just a small child at that
Just a small child, okay. I still think of 5 as like a toddler, even though it's not really, but like toddler for me is like up until like 7 in my head. This is my number one kid.
So, yeah, sorry, sweetie, you're wrong, but
yeah.
Okay.
I just like, I have no I was telling Owen about that. I just like, when kids say that they're in 3rd grade, that means nothing to me. I don't know what age you are in 3rd grade. I don't know what you look like when you are that age either. Like, it's all just childhood melds together for me. Right. But yeah, she sees her mother choose Ruth May over her and leave her. And she just has to figure out how to get through this by herself as a kid. And eventually, when Ruth May dies, spoilers, her mother does choose her because her mother says later, you are the next youngest. And I look out for the next youngest, but there's always a sort of suspicion to her that it wasn't that simple, that it was simply she was the only one left, you know?
Yeah.
Leah was going to stay. Rachel had already gone off. Ruth May was gone. I was what she was left with. And it's pretty rough, you know? And I don't think that Oleana would have argued about that if she had really pushed it, but she chose in that conversation with her mother not to push it because she didn't really want to know for sure.
Well, she did say at the very end that they talked it through and she felt better afterward because her choosing Ruth when Orleana talks about, you know what, when it comes to motherhood, you take care of your kids from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. It says that it's like, oh, she didn't choose Ruth May because Ruth May was perfect, because Ruth May was blonde, because Ruth May was audacious and she liked her better. She chose Ruth May because she was the youngest and needed the most help. Even though I needed pretty much that much help too, I wasn't the youngest, so that was why she chose that. It wasn't that she doesn't love me, it's that that's just how it works in her head. And now I'm the youngest, so she has to make sure that I'm taken care of. And that made Ada feel really safe because no one's ever going to be the youngest except for her.
See, I felt like when she told Ada that because Ada was kind of like, yeah, right, I'll take that. But that she didn't 100% buy it, you know?
There was a big portion of like, okay, I'm going to decide to accept that and let it
right.
help me. But
when we're in Orleana's head, she's calling Ruth May her favorite a lot.
Well, yeah, but your baby is always your favorite. I've talked to some mamas about this.
See, I don't know about that, so yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like Ada had a pretty accurate take, but she just decided she just wasn't going to open that door. You know what I mean?
It's best to not look at some things too closely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Ruth May, she dies of a snake bite after everything really starts to go badly here after the fire and, you know, Leah fighting with everybody. Because what's-his-face takes her side and they start to, like, antagonize him as well because he's sleeping in the chicken house.
Oh, Nelson, their houseboy.
Yeah.
Nelson was solidly on Ada's side because even he can see that the household needs a man.
Leah's side.
Oh, yeah, Leah's side. Yeah. Nelson solidly takes Leah's side because he can see that we need some meat, damn it. And also, she's a good shot. Fuck it.
Yeah.
I got her house. It's going to be fine, guys. And yeah, the town holy man who, like, you know, makes fetishes and sees to people's souls and is teaching them, you know, whatever religion has been traditional there for a while. He gets real mad at the Price family over this thing. It's kind of interesting. He wasn't stirring up any shit when, you know, there were just a competing god, but there's a woman who wants to shoot a bow and arrow at animals and we must stop this shit.
Right.
That's the thing that's super threatening to this rival pastor. For fuck's sake, guys, feminism is scary. And
it's the one thing that he's probably feeling like he can control at all.
Yeah. But alas, that is not the case. So yeah,
Indeed
he starts putting snakes places. And the girls are not stupid. They know that these snakes are not showing up in random places that are, you know, attached their allies naturally. That's not what's going on. They pretty much know what's happening, but the whole village is like, oh, these snakes are just showing up at all these places where the Price family is, you know, welcome. Right. That must be the gods, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's so many factors of everybody believing different things and putting importance on different things. And it's just so frustrating. Can we just get on the same page and eat dinner? Fuck.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think the whole village knew what was going on. They're like, yeah, he's trying to scare the white people away, and we're just not going to stop that because they really got to go. And the things he's using to scare them, it's just like, oh, there's some snakes around. Well, if you don't fucking poke snakes, they won't fucking poke you.
Right.
So long as the white people leave well enough alone, they'll just maybe get the picture and toddle on back to wherever the fuck they came from. But alas, that is not how it played out.
I love in retrospect. What's that?
Oh, he really was trying to be chill about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to nudge you until you get out.
There's when Leah's looking back at one point, because eventually one of the chieftains offers to marry Rachel because he can see that their family is starving to death, and he's like, well, I'll do that favor for you. And this leads to Rachel pretending to be engaged to the other dude and then actually eventually running off with him. But this, in retrospect, Leah realizes was meant to be incentive for them to get the fuck out. That this chieftain knew it wasn't going to be taken well that he offered to marry this girl, and that he was trying to get them to see there are too many mouths to feed already, and y'all should leave. You can, and we can't. So go and stop draining our resources. And I love the fact that Leah looks back and sees that and realizes that was him being crafty, because she really has been told so much how naive to the world the Congolese are. And now she after everything goes down, she realizes they know way more than any of us because they have had to, because they've been fucked right, left, and center by every fucking white person they have ever met. So they know far better than us how to manipulate and get things done without having to have a confrontation like that. So yeah, that leads to eventually Rachel just fucking taking off, and she winds up going to Johannesburg. Is that right?
Yeah, she ends up in South Africa.
Right. And this all sort of implodes because of Ruth May. She gets bit by a snake that was planted by that man. And he, when she dies, Orleana basically cracks. That's it. Mm-hmm. She's not fucking playing anymore. And she goes into the house and gets all of their possessions and puts them outside and is like, take what you need, take what you want. I don't know why we even have any of this. And then she leaves, and her kids are just like, oh, fuck. Okay. No, we're going. It's not even like she's like, come on, girls, we're getting out. She just goes, and her daughters are like, fucking thank you, and follow of their own volition. It's not an organized exodus. Yeah. She doesn't even really plan to leave and never come back exactly. It's like she hasn't even thought ahead that far. In the moment, she is just so grief-stricken, heartbroken, and completely in shock that she just starts walking. And by the time she realizes that she has gone too far and isn't turning around, everybody's got malaria. It was raining, pretty much as soon as Ruth May died and everyone knew about that, suddenly the rain started, and it had been droughting for a while, but it was monsoon season. Right. And so, yeah, she's walking through this hot ass rain, and they're getting eaten up to death. And the whole village is kind of watching them, so most of this Exodus part is through Leah's point of view. Mm-hmm. And Leah had hardcore malaria at the time, because when you walk away from your house, you also walk away from your quinine pills. Yeah. Yeah. So Leah got just hardcore malaria pretty quick. And so she is not a reliable narrator, but the things that she does see is pretty much the village is watching them do this and being like, oh, white woman done snapped. Well, can't hardly blame her. Mm-hmm. And so they get to what has to be the other side of the village. They cannot have gotten far, and their neighbors are literally taking them in. Yeah.
and telling him, okay, if you follow this road for 2 days, you'll get to a city you've never been to. But go for it, man. I mean, like, it's what you do. It's what you got to do. It's like, you sure you want to walk in this rain? I guess you do. But yeah, like, people are just like taking them in and being like, no, honey, don't walk in this for just a couple hours. Let's just let it, like just taking them into their house. I cannot get over this. I cannot emphasize how amazing this is enough, where they're just like, oh yeah, we see what happened. We're going to extend to you hospitality and human kindness and understanding that transcends language, because Orleana still doesn't speak very much of this language.
Yeah.
Like, she still has no idea what's going on most of the time. The only reason we know what's going on is because Ada's also a narrator and she knows what's going on. Actually, Ada and Leah both had a lot of language at this point.
Yeah.
And they're the
and
only
it's
ones.
like, what's that?
They're the only ones that did.
Well, and I feel like with Orleana, like, she couldn't have, because her husband, I think, would have seen it as a slight. If she started to learn and know more than him about this, she couldn't have helped wanting to correct him and stuff. And, you know, like, cause she has enough of a spark at moments that it gets his dander up. You know, he at one point is like talking about how they don't respect their own bodies. And she's like, they don't have tools to rely on to spare their bodies like we do. They just have to do what they have to do. And he gives her this long look that the girls all recognize as being like the indicator that you're about to get hit if you keep talking, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like if she tried to learn and do better, he would have seen that as a real threat. So the girls that can manage to do it, except for Rachel, who does not care, are doing it. I mean, even Ruth May was doing it.
Oh yeah, Ruth May was going to be like, she was going to own that village, man.
She was champion. Mm-hmm.
She really was. She was going to own that village. Girlfriend and knew where it was at.
So by the time they get to where they're going, because they're just trying to get to an airport, pretty much.
Yep.
Rachel, just like I said, takes off with what's his face.
Absolutely.
That's right.
The CIA operative.
This fucking guy.
Yeah.
He is such a shady bitch.
Yeah.
Like, and it turns out that, like, you know, he's fucking everything that moves, and he winds up eventually giving her a venereal disease because she does sleep with him and has like an ongoing relationship with him that makes her sterile, even though she had been like kind of thinking she was going to have kids eventually. She can't.
I think it was gonorrhea, but they never do say.
Yeah. She just says female complications. But she just disappears, and I don't think he even tells them where she's going. I think she gets in touch eventually once she's settled there. But I don't remember there being a moment of like, goodbye, I'm doing this other thing with her mother. Was there?
There wasn't one that we saw. Again, during that whole Exodus period, most of the narration is from Leah's perspective. Mm-hmm. And she saw her mom talk to Axelroot, and she saw her, and she knows that Rachel was like chill with it, anything to get away from this fucking village. Mm-hmm. And I think Orleana knew that trekking through the jungle wasn't gonna work for Rachel. Mm-hmm. She wanted to get them all out on the airplane, but Eben wasn't having it. Absolutely,
yeah, that's right.
Not having it. So she's like, well, what if you only took one? And none of us knows what Orleana gave up to make that deal. Did she give him her wedding ring that she had been saving for just such a ticket? Did she give him other things? We don't know. But you know she did something to get him to take this woman child out of the jungle. And then once he had done that, he just kind of kept her as a pet. Mm-hmm. But he did keep her because he got money from the embassy for saving a white woman
right.
from the darkest jungles. So like that was his thing to keep her around, and she didn't want to go back to the States, I guess, for the reasons we've discussed, or maybe she didn't have the means, but she definitely chose to do with her circumstances what she could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she goes on, like, she's with him for a while. Then she leverages herself into a marriage with a diplomat by basically, like, capitalizing on the fact that his present wife is not willing to do some things that are going to be necessary for his job, and being like, I would have no problem with doing any of that. And she's attractive and, vivacious in a way that is necessary for something really social like that. And so he takes her up on it. And before you know it, 5 marriages later, she's inherited lots of money, has opened this really like posh hotel that lives off of the backs of the native people and only is for rich white people, and has basically embodied everything that is wrong with the imperialism and the systems that have victimized this country as a whole. Mm-hmm. And it's horrifying to see how little she gives any shits about any of it. And Leah, like, for her part, she stays because she's in the relationship with Anatole and has realized that, like, she is so complicit just by being white that she can't just, like, leave. She just feels wrong about running away to the safety that her privilege affords her when he is going to remain here fighting for people that he cares about and for a country that he cares about. So she watches her sister on the same continent, but in a whole other, like, life, doing everything that she has grown to understand is despicable and wrong, and has to live with knowing that it's that close, that she can't even distance herself as far as, like, well, that's my government, but I don't, it's her sister is one of these people doing this, like. And there are some moments with Leah where I was really uncomfortable because of how much she was, like, feeling guilty and waiting for Anatole to, like, hold her while she was crying from guilt. And then eventually he gets arrested because they know that he's a radical that's trying to, like, subvert what the US is doing. And she has nobody to absolve her. And she starts to realize how much she's relied on him to assuage her white guilt and make her feel better. And she never even, like, saw it until it was gone. And she just had to sit in it and feel it and know. And to top it off, once he's arrested, she doesn't have the benefit of being married to a black man in this community and being part of the community through that. Now she's a white woman by herself. She has kids at that point, I think.
Yeah.
But it's not like, she just starts to really see, no matter what, she's a guest. This isn't her place. As much as she tries to fit in and dress the same way and behave at markets and, socially the same way, it doesn't matter. She'll always still be white, and she'll always still not quite belong here and have to, like, make everybody feel safe being around her. And I really liked all of those revelations and how Anatole eases her into that, but then eventually he gets taken out of the equation and she has to, like, face what it means and what she's been doing in a whole other way once he's gone, Mm-hmm. I just really liked the whole progression of Leah's story in that respect a lot.
Yeah, she's just so fascinating. She goes, she really, really needs to have a man to look up to. But that said, She has the most, she creates the most agency for herself of any of them. She just, like, decides to do something and then she just does it. And Ada gets that later, but Leah was just barreling through. She's just, I'm just going to do this. And it's hard when you make up your mind to do something and the people around you, well, not even do something, be something. She just wants to be human. And it's hard when there are these lines that are drawn around who is human to other humans and who is not human to other humans, and these rules around why. and she wants, as a person who experiences white liberal guilt on a daily basis, all we want is for someone to say that we're one of the good ones.
Right.
And when Anatole's not there to be that guy,
yeah,
it gets real hard to deal with the sins that the people who look like you do to people who don't look like you on a daily basis, and be like, how do I make up for this shit when I can't even stop my own people?
Yeah.
And I feel her on that. It hurts. And no one's got any fucking pity for that pain, and they really shouldn't. But yeah, she struggled, and I'm glad someone wrote it down in a way that doesn't make us all assholes.
And manages to simultaneously be honest about that, that, it's, she's asking for labor from him by, and she finally comes to recognize that, because like I said, when I was reading her, talking about how he held her while she cried from guilt after the U.S. again scuttled an attempt to do something, I was just like, oh, Anatole, you must really love her, because that is a lot of fucking work. And then eventually she kind of just says that he was doing all this work and I didn't even realize. And for her part, Ada goes home with her mother, and she winds up turning out to be basically a genius, which you could tell because she was just, her mind was off the wall when you were reading her perspective. And there was lots of playing with words and palindromes and things like that. Yeah. And she winds up going to medical school and doing a lot of studies on different parasitic organisms and viruses and things. Mm-hmm. And she and Leah and Rachel all get together at one point at towards the very end of the book. They're all in their 40s and 50s by then, I think. And Rachel still doesn't have the wit that they have. She's misusing words left and right throughout her life and never figures out and when she meets up with them, they're making jokes about things that you'd think she would have cottoned on to what those jokes are by now. And she still doesn't get it, and there is a moment where Rachel had apparently asked if, we could come and see the Continental, which is the name of her hotel, and that she would like to bring Anatole and have him come to the bar. And Rachel doesn't want a black man coming to the bar. There's a separate spot for black people to wait outside. The chauffeurs and maids wait there. They're very lucky to have this shaded area that I've built for them. Yeah.
Don't you know I poured concrete and put up a tin roof and everything? They can put chairs out there. It's it's way better than forcing them to stand out in the hot sun.
And she, this is Leah's husband, and Rachel doesn't understand why Leah is so disgusted. It's not even Leah's not expecting Rachel to suddenly change her mind about white supremacy and realize that she's not expecting that. She's simply expecting Rachel to extend an olive branch temporarily for a couple of hours to the man that she's married to, and Rachel can't even do that.
Who is just getting out of prison, where he's been for years. That's but even before that, we get this glimpse into Rachel's head for a little bit, where she's talking about how no one's ever helping her with the equatorial, and no one ever comes, and blah, blah, blah. And she talks about her sister Leah having, married Africa, and about how, all she ever talks about in her letters is those children of hers. And you know what? I just don't see how those children are any kin to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're black.
Yep.
And it's right there, Rachel is a lost cause.
Yep.
You can't even get over your shit to recognize your nephews. And those kids were cool.
Yeah. Yeah. They were really they go on and do some they obviously have a ton of potential and have some really like good parents to look up to. Yeah, Rachel, like there are just so many moments where it becomes like clearer and clearer that she's not going to grow. Who she was when she arrived in the Congo is who she's going to stay. And that's just all there is to it.
Yeah. And honestly, I think, again, I read this for the first time when I was 18. And I think having the like archetype of a Rachel type person in my head this whole time, so I could fit people into that and just like understand that some people are just stupid and they're just not going to change. Mm-hmm. That has helped me immensely.
Yeah, some people are just really, really deeply selfish and self-centered and do not understand the concept of empathy and compassion. They just sincerely don't get it. They don't know how to do it.
It is just what it is. Move on.
Yep.
Don't waste your time on them.
Yep.
And yeah. Like honestly, this book changed so much about me. There's a line that is one of Ada's where she's really, really toward the end of the book where she's doing she's doing her research in about like, you know, bacteria and various other things that can kill you, parasites and such. And she realizes that it's not that God is cruel. It's that God's rooting for the parasites just as hard as he's rooting for any of us. Mm-hmm, and that they have a right to live in God's eyes too. And that moment when I read that for the first time, that's when I stopped looking for God. Because it's true. God probably loves all of their creations as much as any other. So why the hell would I be so special? I'm never going to be a favorite. So why bother? And it's like, thank you, Ada.
For freeing me of that. Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah. What happens with Orlean, they figure out that their father probably died. And there was like this big to-do about it. And it seems like burned to death. And Ada goes and tells her mother, and her mother's just like, I don't really fucking give a shit what happened to him. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know about it. It's over and I'm done with it. And I was like, you know what, woman, respect. True. Good attitude, I feel. So I'm looking at I'm sorry, guys. I just ignored the chat this whole time because I was like so involved in this book.
Oh, I had to turn it off because I wanted to focus.
Yeah, I like oftentimes I'm like aware and able to like talk to people as I'm doing this, but there was so much, and we only have 4 minutes before this literally shuts down on us. C-Star says Kingsolver is one of the few authors whose non-historical fiction I read, though this one is historical fiction, and thus is one of her best books, though not my favorite. So I'm eager to hear this discussion. Chris says Gwen says hi. Hi, Gwen. And then C-Star says, I wonder how I would act and change if I went through the same experience as these girls. I don't think I especially relate to Rachel, but I can't say I'm certain I would adapt as admirably as her sisters. As somebody who like only spent a couple of months in Guatemala, not nearly as long as they do, I will say that Leah's reactions to going back to the United States were very similar to mine, where you suddenly realize how like sanitized everything is, how completely sealed in houses are from the elements and from any sort of like that was one of the main things, was just you can be completely disconnected from nature in the United States in a way that it was not possible to be when I was in Guatemala, at least in the areas that I was in. And also when she comments on how there are no smells, huge thing. I couldn't get over it when I was in Guatemala. The assault constantly. There's a whole street that everybody who is homeless has agreed is a toilet, and that just stinks like human shit. But then right here, we have vendors who are making like kebabs, and I'm getting that too. And then there's the sewer that's running out here, so it smells like piss. But then there's somebody's window open and they're smoking. There's the exhaust from the car, and everything just feels like overload. And then you come up here and there's nothing. And it's weird. All of these moments of just like seeing all of these people, you know, they're describing all of their their disabilities, their bad teeth, like, being blind in one eye or having disfigurements. And that was another thing I didn't realize until I left and came back. We can fucking fix everything, and you don't even have to be that wealthy to at least afford braces and things like that. And people look totally different in countries where those sorts of things are not available to them as easily. Just every little thing is different. And it was a weird shock to come back and like see commercials where people have flawless complexions and teeth that blind you. And for that to be something to like be looking up to, because it looks so creepy and unnatural after you've been around people who don't have that you're like, we find this attractive, but it doesn't take long to forget that. And once again, find it attractive. Like, you unlearn what you thought you learned very easily. So I don't know. We only have a minute left. I'm sorry, Miles. I saw your comment. He says he met Barbara Kingsolver. I know her family. I hate you. Go to hell. Please, bitches, do you have anything that you would like to say as we wrap up?
No, I think I've covered all of my points. Thank you so much for letting me be on this podcast with you. This book has been obviously very important in my life, and I'm happy to get to experience it with you and chat about it. This has been fantastic. Miles, I also hate you. And you should die hideously, quite painfully. I can facilitate that. Let's talk about it.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, thank you very much first of all, thank you for joining me. And I'm really glad that somebody who has read this so many times was able to get in on this with me. And thank you to everybody who voted for this one, because it was super duper good. And I really liked it, even though it ripped my heart out and threw it in my face. And I'm definitely going to have to look into reading some more of her stuff. So, all right, guys, gotta go before we get cut off. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.